Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Buckley, an AMFT Solution Focued parenting strategist, family systems coach, and sports psychology informed ADHD specialist. I've been with my husband for over 3 decades, and together we've raised a thriving 23-year-old neurodivergent son whose journey continues to shape the work I do with families every single day. If your child is struggling with ADHD, OCD, anxiety, or executive functioning challenges, or if you're a young adult trying to understand your own patterns, this is the place for you. Let's get started. Parentification is one of the most powerful, least discussed dynamics inside the family system, particularly in households where ADHD, anxiety, OCD, depression, or inconsistent parenting already exists. It rarely announces itself loudly. Instead, it slips in quietly, often disguised as helpfulness, maturity, or being such a good kid. Almost no parent does it intentionally, yet it becomes one of the most profound emotional burdens a child can carry because it asks them to operate far beyond their developmental capacity. Parentification occurs the moment a child begins doing the job of the adult practically, emotionally, or both. Rather than living fully inside the safety and predictability of their childhood, they step into roles designed for the parents, and once the system trains them into that position, it becomes extremely difficult for them to step back out. Their nervous system begins to believe the family needs them. There are 2 major forms of parentification, though they often overlap. The first is instrumental parentification, which appears when a child starts managing tasks and responsibilities that belong to adults. This happens, for example, when a child becomes the default helper in the mornings, getting siblings ready, monitoring routines, organizing spaces, or taking on tasks purely because those responsibilities keep falling through adult cracks. In ADHD households, where the environment can be disorganized, emotionally intense, or unpredictable, these children become the structure. Executive functioning challenges in adults, not just children, create a dynamic where the most competent child unconsciously becomes the stabilizer. The nuance is important. The child becomes the reliable one, not because they are ready, but because the system requires reliability, and they happen to be the most available option. The second form is emotional parentification, which is quieter and far more damaging. This occurs when a child becomes the emotional caretaker of a parent, a sibling, or even the entire household. It is the child who comforts a parent in distress, who becomes the person a parent vents to, who anticipates adult emotions before they happen, who monitors tone and energy in the home, who tries to prevent arguments or meltdowns, and who steps into mediator roles during conflict. Emotional parentification teaches the child that their job is to manage emotional tension. Over time, the child internalizes messages such as, "I am responsible for other people's emotional states," or "I must fix, soothe, or stabilize the adults around me." This becomes part of their identity, not just their behavior. Parentification shows up so intensely in ADHD households because ADHD fundamentally changes the way stress, communication, and emotional regulation function. Adults with ADHD may struggle to hold emotional space, tolerate conflict, initiate difficult conversations, follow through consistently, manage household overwhelm, or regulate during high-stress moments. When the adults are dysregulated or inconsistent, the system unconsciously recruits the child who appears to be the most emotionally perceptive. Many children with ADHD are incredibly intuitive. They might struggle with time, organization, or academic tasks, yet emotionally, they read the room with striking precision. So when tension rises, these children leap in automatically, not because they want to, but because their nervous system feels responsible for stabilizing the environment. These children often hear feedback like, "You're so mature for your age," or "You're the only one who understands me," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." Beneath that praise is the uncomfortable truth. The child is carrying emotional weight that does not belong to them. Over time, these children grow into young adults who overfunction in relationships, who become the fixer or the therapist friend, who feel guilty when they're not helping, who struggle to rest or ask for support, who feel responsible for everyone's emotions, who choose partners they must rescue or stabilize, and who carry an almost reflexive sense of guilt anytime they place their own needs first. From the outside, they appear mature, stable, capable, and independent. But internally, they are often exhausted, hyper-vigilant, and wired for responsibility far beyond their years. It is common for young adults raised in parentified roles to describe feeling like they don't know how to simply exist, they only know how to manage. Signs of parentification often appear subtly. A child may worry about adult issues, try to solve problems they didn't create, mediate arguments, interpret emotions, anticipate conflict, avoid sharing their own needs to keep the peace, or jump into helping roles without being asked. They often carry guilt when things go wrong, even when the issue is far outside their control. And when a child already struggles with ADHD, parentification often turns into hyper-responsibility. The child believes their emotional labor is essential to keeping the household stable. How parentification shows up in the non-ADHD child. Parentification doesn't only affect the child who is neurodivergent. In many families, the non-ADHD child becomes the quiet carrier of emotional labor in ways that are profoundly overlooked. Because the neurodivergent child often receives more attention, both supportive and corrective, the non-ADHD child may unconsciously step into the stabilizer role. They learn early that their job is to stay regulated, stay predictable, and stay out of the way. Parents rarely intend for this to happen. It is simply the system reorganizing around the highest need child. For the non-ADHD sibling, parentification often forms through a subtle, unspoken equation. My emotions are less important because someone else's emotions take priority. These children quickly understand that expressing big feelings is inconvenient, so they suppress them. They avoid adding stress to the household. They become the child who self-manages, self-soothes, and self-contains. Over time, they may be praised for being easy, mature, or low maintenance. But beneath that praise is an invisible emotional cost. They learn that their internal world must be quiet to keep the family functioning. Many non-ADHD children also move into a role I describe as the compensator. They work harder, achieve more, comply more quickly, and become highly attuned to doing things the right way because they sense the system depends on their competence. They absorb the message, you can handle it, so you should. This pressure is rarely spoken aloud, but it shapes their development profoundly. These children often become perfectionistic, anxious, or overly responsible because they believe the family depends on their performance and stability. Emotionally, the non-ADHD sibling may struggle with loneliness, resentment, or guilt loneliness because they feel unseen, resentment because their needs are consistently deprioritized, and guilt because they know their siblings' challenges are real and therefore feel undeserving of support themselves. They may take on caretaking behaviors toward the neurodivergent sibling, becoming the mediator during meltdowns, the helper during routines, or the emotional support person when the household feels overwhelmed. Their own boundaries soften, and their nervous system becomes wired for hyper-awareness of everyone else's needs. In adolescence and adulthood, these children often describe feeling as though they don't want to be a burden, don't know how to ask for help, or feel guilty resting. They become the high achievers, the peacemakers, or the ones who blame themselves when relationships become strained. They learned early that their role was to create balance, and this identity can follow them into friendships, romantic relationships, and even the workplace. Supporting the non-ADHD child requires deliberate, intentional recalibration. They need to know that their emotional world is not less important. They need to be invited into connection without being assigned responsibility. They need dedicated one-on-one time where they are not performing, helping, or compensating. And they need explicit reassurance that their role in the family is not to stabilize everyone else. When parents consciously redistribute emotional labor and clarify that all children, not just the ones struggling, are entitled to care, attention, and support, the non-ADHD child finally experiences relief. They can return to being what they were always meant to be, a child, not a quiet caretaker. So how do we interrupt this pattern? The first step is reclaiming the adult role and doing so out loud. Children need to hear direct statements such as, "That's not your job," and "This is an adult responsibility." Their nervous system cannot release the emotional load until the adults clearly take it back. The next step is returning them to age-appropriate responsibilities. They should contribute in small, predictable ways, a routine, a simple chore, a consistent task, but they should not be carrying emotional labor, conflict management, or adult-level problem solving. It is also essential to stop using the child as a messenger, mediator, or emotional buffer. Even when the adults feel overwhelmed or uncomfortable, communication must return to the adults. And finally, children need frequent reassurance. Statements such as, "You don't have to fix this," or "You're not responsible for our stress," or "You get to be a kid in this family," are more powerful than most parents realize. Parentification is not caused by bad parenting. It is caused by overwhelmed parenting. And overwhelmed parents can absolutely reclaim leadership, reorganize roles, and restore emotional safety. When adults take their rightful place in the system, children can finally step out of survival mode. They can reclaim their childhood, and young adults can release roles they never should have held in the first place. Naming the pattern is the beginning. Resetting the roles is the repair. Consistency is what creates lasting healing. Thank you for listening to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. If today's episode gave you clarity or helped you understand your family system in a new way, share it with someone who needs it. For more tools, resources, and parent coaching support, visit thepath2peacetherapy.com or connect with me on Instagram at thepath2peacetherapy. And remember, small shifts lead to big change. I'll see you in the next episode.